Listen up, kids, this is history. The Swahili Coast extends roughly from Mogadishu in Somalia southwards to Kenya and Tanzania all the way to Cape de Lago in Mozambique, and incorporates a number of islands in the Indian Ocean including northern Madagascar. Swahili societies grew out of the agricultural and maritime communities of the East African coast that had been developing for centuries prior, engaging with the interior of the African continent and the wider Indian Ocean world. These societies shared particular commonalities such as the widespread adoption of Islam, coral limestone architecture mixed with earth and thatch buildings, a unique pottery tradition with regional variations, and participation in trade networks linking East Africa to global economies. Thanks to their far-reaching trade networks, the Swahili were growing both rich and well-informed about life in faraway lands and becoming cosmopolitan in outlook and orientation. Merchants resident in these towns were exchanging African gold, wood, ivory, skins, and other goods for items such as porcelain, cloth, and beads from China and India, interconnected through a network of distinctive yet probably largely independent urban towns. The various Swahili city-states reached a climax of wealth and intensive building activity in stone between the 13th and 16th centuries AD, after which many towns declined and were abandoned partly as a consequence of the Portuguese and other foreign powers entering the Indian Ocean and disrupting pre-existing trade and cultural dynamics. Other towns fared much better, however, and may have even benefited materially from the presence of European trading partners. While occupation at sites like Malindi, Mombasa, and Mogadishu has continued to the present day, Geddy was largely abandoned by the early 17th century. But what was Geddy really? Who lived there? And why was the ancient town abandoned? Let's travel to the coast of Kenya, 105 kilometers northeast of Mombasa, and break down Gedi Ruins to try and answer some of these questions. 802 AH, a date in the Islamic calendar which roughly translates to 1399 AD. This date, incised in Arabic on the epitaph of the dated tomb, gives us a clue as to Geddy's age. According to archaeological and historical studies, Geddy was founded around the year 1300, peaked in the 1400s, and was finally abandoned in the early 1600s. Like every other structure within these ruins, it's built of coral rag, a rubbly limestone rock made of ancient coral reef material that's been glued together with lime mortar and red earth, with surfaces plastered and cut coral employed for fine edges. Right next to the dated tomb is the tomb of the fluted pillar, one of the pillar tombs found all along the coast of East Africa. These monumental stone pillars range from 3 to 8 meters tall, on average. The tallest known pillar, which has now collapsed, was probably at Mambrui, Kenya, and might have been 15 meters tall. That's a whopping 5 stories! Their height makes them much more visible from a great distance and over the walls of the buildings. The visual dominance of these structures suggests the great wealth and status of those who are buried therein. Another tomb, aptly named the Pillar Tomb, stands tall and proud next to the Great Palace. But the vast majority of people were not buried in such pronounced structures. The mortuary record consists both of tombs with a stone superstructure, like the ones we see here, and graves with no superstructure, aka normal graves. The dead were buried within or outside the town, sometimes in a very central position in the settlement, sometimes on the outskirts of town. Tombs were constructed in isolation or in small clusters, usually of 2 to 6, outside or inside the residential areas. One or more walls of the tomb were decorated or paneled. Tomb inscriptions, if present, communicate gender, status, and occupation of the deceased. They can make claims of ownership, origin, or ethnicity. The most prominent decoration is usually reserved for the main wall of the tomb, which is generally on the eastern side. This might feature elements such as shallow decorative niches, paneling, inscriptions, and a series of recessed surfaces or niches for the display of imported Chinese porcelain or incense burners. And it is also where a pillar is positioned if one is to be found. Researchers have drawn parallels between the pillar tombs of the Swahili Coast and the phallic monuments of the Horn of Africa, for example at Tutofela in southern Ethiopia. However, these pillars are usually smaller than those found in Swahili contexts, and appear more numerous, occurring across the entire burial ground, and not just used selectively for specific individuals. Also, they are not found in the same kind of urban context as Swahili sites. Monumental carved monoliths were widespread as markers of elite burials in Aksum in Ethiopia. But long before they built monumental tombs, the people of Geddy built stone houses and mosques. The Great Mosque, built in the 15th century, is a typical East African congregational mosque. The plan is rectangular with 3 doors in each of the long, 4-meter-high walls. It is approached through a courtyard with a well, conduit, and a cistern at the northern end, and an octagonal pillar tomb at the southeast corner. In the north wall of the mosque is the mihrab, once decorated with porcelain bowls, showing the direction of Mecca. To the right of the mihrab stands the minbar, the equivalent of a pulpit, made of 3 steps. The roof was supported on 3 rows of 6 rectangular pillars. The middle row, running down the center of the building and obscuring the view of the mihrab. This curious arrangement is only found in East Africa. The square niches in the pilasters along the walls are for lamps. The partition wall, cutting off the rear 3 bays, was probably a modification when the roof had partially collapsed and only part of the mosque was being used. This may also have served to create a separate area for women at the back of the mosque after reconstruction. Relative to other buildings within the town, the mosque achieved a rather wide span, with the width of each bay approximately 2.1 meters. A few hundred meters from the Great Mosque is the Great Palace and its annex, covering an area of about 1/4 of an acre. The main entrance consists of a pointed arch on a platform, approached by a flight of steps with a bench on either side, which leads down to a sunken court, which serves as a reception room. In the floor of the court are 2 sumps for rainwater. These are found in all the streets and courts of the town, and sometimes also in the rooms. A passage leads from the reception court to the audience court, where trials would have been held. Between the reception court and the audience court is a small apartment. It includes a lavatory, consisting of 2 small cubicles with a low partition wall between them. In one was a pit with a square hole and a urinal channel. In the other, a washing bench with 2 cavities for bowls in an upper tier, and a divided seat used as a bidet in the lower. The outer room has a cupboard and niches for lamps in the pilasters framing the door leading into the other rooms. The palace may have served as a government complex from where all public functions were administered. "14 large stone houses have been found at Geddy. They are named after the artifacts found in them, hence names like House of the Venetian Bead, House of the Iron Lamp, and House of the Cowries. Many of these items are foreign to the East African coast. Excavations uncovered porcelain bowls and coins from China, glass beads from Venice, cowrie shells that were probably used as currency, and many other artifacts stored in the Geddy Museum. In the plaster of the outer room of the House of the Dhow, there is an incised picture showing what appears to be a boat, a Swahili dhow to be precise. Geddy, as mentioned earlier, was heavily involved in the Indian Ocean trade. Naturally, sailing was part of their life and livelihood, and the dhow was their tool of choice to ride the monsoon winds to seek fortunes far and away. The houses, palace, and Great Mosque are enclosed inside 2 rings of irregularly shaped walls. The interior walls include an area of approximately 44.5 acres, and the exterior 74 acres. A large rural hinterland is believed to have supported the inhabitants of Geddy, including farms, fishing docks, and coral stone mines. The hidden majority of Geddy's citizens lived in modest houses, built using mangrove rafters, makuti roofing, and walls made out of old coral stones. This robust method of construction is still used in the South Coast to date. The large Arabuko-Sokoke forest may have supplied timber for charcoal and lime burning, for construction, and even for export. It could have been a place for subsistence hunting and the procurement of ivory from elephants. We can imagine people in the past fishing in the mangroves as they do today. There are many theories surrounding the decline of Geddy. Some believe they were attacked by nomadic pastoral communities who temporarily occupied the town themselves. Others argue that the rise of European powers in the Indian Ocean trade cut off the coastal people from their most lucrative markets. Still others claim that the drying up of wells and the subsequent lack of fresh water, paired with the spread of diseases, was the ultimate downfall of Geddy. Whatever the reason or combination of reasons may be, What's certain is by the late 19th century, Geddy had long been abandoned, and the site would only be gazetted as a historical monument in 1927. The ruins at Geddy represent an urban society with distinctive stone architecture, social structures, and a diverse economy, which used features and items from across the Indian Ocean in new contexts. It reflects the possible role of the Swahili as culture brokers on the East African coast, bridging the gap between continental Africa and the rest of the world. While much of Geddy's history has been lost in the sea of time, we should ultimately be grateful for the lingering legacies of the past that these crumbling walls have managed to preserve. My name is History Uncle, and you have been schooled.